The for sale sign had been up for months, faded and tilting in the overgrown yard. Most people saw the crumbling paint, the crooked porch, and the sheer age of the Blackwood Manor and drove right by. But for the Millers, Sarah, a historian with a penchant for forgotten narratives, Tom, a pragmatic architect looking for a challenging restoration project, and their two kids, Leo, 10, and Maya, 7, it was perfect. It was a fixer-upper, yes, but more importantly, it felt like a story waiting to be uncovered. Nestled deep in the secluded woods of rural Maine, Blackwood Manor had stood silent for over a century, an imposing silhouette against the darkening sky. Its original owner, a reclusive ship captain named Elias Blackwood, had vanished without a trace in 1892, leaving behind a legacy of whispers and local superstitions. The house itself seemed to breathe with a heavy, ancient sigh, the kind that held secrets too long. Moving day was a chaos of boxes and dust motes, dancing in sunbeams that struggled to penetrate the grime-coated windows. "It's got character," Tom declared, wiping sweat from his brow, though Sarah noticed a flicker of apprehension in his eyes as he surveyed the vast, echoing foyer. Leo, ever the adventurer, immediately set off exploring, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom of disused rooms. Maya, however, clung to Sarah's leg, her usually bubbly demeanor replaced by a quiet unease. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The house feels sad." That first week was a blur of unpacking and minor discoveries. They found intricate, forgotten wallpaper patterns beneath layers of peeling paint, a collection of dusty, unread books on nautical history, and a rusted compass embedded in the floorboards of the study. Nothing overtly strange, just the typical remnants of lives long past. Yet there were subtle things. A persistent chill in the master bedroom, even with the windows closed. The faint scent of brine and something coppery that would drift in and out, especially in the evenings, and soft, almost imperceptible whispers that Sarah at first dismissed as the house settling. One afternoon, while clearing out an old built-in cabinet in the library, Sarah's fingers brushed against a loose panel. Behind it, tucked away in the darkness, was a small leather-bound journal. Its pages were brittle, the ink faded, but a date was clearly visible on the first page, October 17, 1888. Her heart gave a little lurch. This was Elias Blackwood's journal. She carefully opened it, the dry paper crackling like ancient bones. The first few entries were mundane, detailing ship logs and weather. But then, an entry in shaky, almost desperate handwriting caught her eye. The whispers are growing louder. They speak of the tide, of what lies beneath the surface, and of the things that cling to our shores, brought in by the storm. I fear this house, this very ground, remembers more than it should. It remembers the sacrifice. A shiver traced its way down Sarah's spine, far colder than any draft. Just then, a faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump echoed from upstairs. A sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. It was too regular to be the wind, too deliberate to be the old house groaning. Sarah clutched the journal tighter, her eyes darting towards the ceiling, a sudden chilling certainty settling over her. The house wasn't just old, it was alive with its past, and its past was just beginning to stir. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, the journal a cold weight in her hand. The thump, thump, thump from upstairs continued, insistent and unnervingly close. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she called out, "Leo! Maya, is that you?" Only the silence of the old house answered, amplifying the strange rhythmic dragging sound. Tom was still outside, wrestling with a stubborn piece of siding, oblivious. Clutching the journal, Sarah crept towards the grand staircase, its banister smooth and cold under her fingers. Each creak of the old wood seemed to echo Captain Blackwood's ominous words. The house remembers the sacrifice. The thumping led her to the second floor, specifically towards the master bedroom, a room they hadn't fully tackled yet, still shrouded in heavy, dust-laden drapes. As she reached the doorway, the thumping stopped abruptly. The air in the room was icy, prickling her skin. A faint, almost imperceptible groan seemed to emanate from the antique four-poster bed, as if the very wood was in pain. Sarah's eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of Leo or Maya, or an innocent explanation for the noise. There was nothing. The bed was undisturbed, the furniture unshifted. Yet a clear, wet track, like something had been dragged across the floorboards, led from the center of the room to the large, built-in wardrobe against the far wall. Her breath hitched. This wasn't dust. It looked like a trail of dried brine, leaving dark, salty streaks on the polished wood, and mixed within it a faint, rust-colored smear. "Mommy," Maya's voice, small and tremulous, drifted from behind her. Sarah spun around, relief momentarily overriding her fear. Maya stood at the top of the stairs, clutching her worn teddy bear. "I heard a sad sound, Mommy, from in here." Her daughter pointed a tiny finger at the master bedroom. "It's just the old house, sweetie," Sarah said, trying to infuse her voice with a calm she didn't feel. "Go play downstairs with Leo, okay? Mommy's just checking something." Maya hesitated, her large eyes fixed on the doorway, before slowly turning and descending the stairs. Alone again, Sarah felt the weight of the journal pressing against her palm. She looked at the strange, wet trail, then at the heavy wooden wardrobe. With a trembling hand, she reached for the ornate brass handle. It was cold, so cold it burned. She pulled, and the old doors groaned open with a sound like a pained cry. The wardrobe was empty, save for a single, tarnished brass key hanging from a hook on the inside. It wasn't just any key. It was heavy, intricately designed, and looked like it belonged to a lock far more substantial than any cupboard. As she reached for it, the scent of brine and something coppery intensified, making her stomach churn. That night, the house seemed to settle deeper into its unsettling silence. Tom dismissed Sarah's concerns about the wet tracks as her imagination, a product of stress and the general creepiness of an old house. Leo was too busy with his newfound hide-and-seek spots, and Maya, after her earlier unease, seemed to have retreated into her own world of quiet play. But Sarah couldn't shake it. She sat up late, poring over Elias Blackwood's journal. As her entries became increasingly fragmented, erratic, He wrote of strange lights on the water, of the whispers from the deep, and of a bargain that had to be paid. Then came the chilling entries, pages stained with what looked like dried watermarks. They demanded a price. The ocean gives and the ocean takes. The harvest was good, but the cost is too great. She screamed, oh God, she screamed. The house heard it all. It holds the echoes. And then, later, the creature. It walks the halls now, waiting. It knows its due. I cannot escape it. The key to the deepest part, where the sacrifice was made, it must never be found. Sarah's blood ran cold. The key. She glanced at the brass key lying on the nightstand, gleaming faintly in the dim light. What deepest part was Blackwood referring to? And who was she? A child? A wife? The terrifying implications of Blackwood's words sent a wave of nausea through her. Suddenly, a distant, piercing wail cut through the silence of the house. It was Maya. A raw, terrified scream that tore through the night, followed by the frantic pounding of little feet. Sarah bolted from the bed, the journal falling to the floor, its pages splayed open, revealing another ominous passage. The children, they are drawn to the truth. They see what we cannot. Maya's screams ripped through the night, a sound that would forever be etched into Sarah's memory. She reached Maya's room in seconds, Tom thundering up the stairs behind her. Maya was huddled in the corner, trembling, her eyes wide with terror fixed on the closed bedroom door. Leo, still groggy from sleep, was sitting up in his bed looking confused and a little scared. Maya, what is it, sweetie? Sarah knelt, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. Maya buried her face in Sarah's shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. The man, Maya choked out, her voice muffled against Sarah's nightgown. He was in the hall, all wet. He looked at me. Tom, ever the pragmatist, immediately flipped on the hall light and checked the corridor. There's no one here, Maya Bug. Just a bad dream. He tried to reassure her, but his eyes met Sarah's over Maya's head. The air in the hallway was undeniably damp, and that faint coppery scent was stronger than ever. It wasn't a dream. After much comforting and with Maya clinging to Sarah's side, they finally got her back to sleep. But Sarah couldn't sleep. The image of Maya's pure terror combined with the journal's cryptic words. The children, they are drawn to the truth. They see what we cannot, left her heart pounding. The man, all wet, Maya described fit chillingly with Blackwood's mentions of brine and the sea. As dawn broke, casting pale light into the once grand, now eerie manor, Sarah decided she couldn't ignore it any longer. She found Tom in the kitchen making coffee, looking tired but determined. Tom, we need to talk, she began, holding up the journal. This house, it's not just old, it's haunted. And Elias, Blackwood knew it. She recounted her discoveries, the wet tracks, the mysterious key, and the increasingly disturbing entries in the journal, especially the references to the sacrifice and the deepest part. Tom, though initially skeptical, listened, his expression slowly shifting from dismissive to concerned as Sarah relayed Maya's terrified encounter. A wet man in the hall, he murmured, a crease forming between his brows. "And that key, you think it opens something specific here?" Blackwood wrote, "The key to the deepest part, where the sacrifice was made. It must never be found," Sarah quoted, her voice low. "I think that's what Maya saw, or heard, something tied to whatever happened here." They spent the morning systematically searching the house, starting with the ground floor. They looked for hidden doors, secret passages, anything a large, ornate key might open. The house was a labyrinth of nooks and crannies, but nothing fit the description of a deepest part. It wasn't until late afternoon when Leo, tired of being excluded from the grown-up treasure hunt, piped up. "There's a weird door in the basement," he said, kicking at a loose floorboard in the living room. "I found it yesterday, behind those old shelves." The basement, of course. It was an unfinished, dirt-floored expanse, prone to flooding and largely ignored. They moved the heavy, moldy shelves Leo indicated. Behind them was a rough-hewn wooden door, blending almost perfectly with the stone foundation. It was small, stout, and clearly not part of the original house design. It looked less like a door and more like a sealed-off passage, and in its center, a large, heavy iron lock. Sarah held up the brass key. It gleamed, catching the faint light from the single bare bulb in the basement. It was a perfect fit. With a collective breath, Tom inserted the key and turned. The lock groaned, a rusty, mournful sound, before clicking open with a resonant thud. Behind the door, a narrow, dark passageway descended into absolute blackness. The air that rushed out was cold and damp, carrying with it a strong, unmistakable smell of salt water and decay. It was the brine, intensified, and within that smell something else, something metallic and thick, the same coppery scent Sarah had noticed upstairs, but far more potent. It smelled of ancient rust and, undeniably, blood. "This must be it," Sarah whispered, her voice barely a tremor. "The deepest part." A chilling current of air swept past them, and for a fleeting moment, Sarah thought she heard the faintest, most mournful echo, like a child's sob carried on the wind. Tom flicked on his heavy-duty flashlight. The beam pierced the darkness, revealing rough-hewn stone walls, slick with moisture, and crude steps leading further down into the earth. It was less a basement and more a sub-basement, a hidden chamber beneath the house, constructed for a purpose Elias Blackwood clearly wished to keep buried. As Tom took the first cautious step down, the sound began. Not a whisper this time, but a low, guttural gurgle, like something choking on water, emanating from the abyssal darkness below. The gurgling sound intensified as Tom descended the crude stone steps, his flashlight beam wavering. Sarah followed. Closely behind, her hand on his shoulder, the weight of Blackwood's journal now a constant chilling reminder. The air grew colder, heavy with the stench of the sea and that sickening coppery tang. Water dripped from the unseen ceiling, echoing eerily in the confined space. The passage opened into a small, circular chamber. The flashlight beam revealed a scene that made Sarah gasp, a choked sound escaping her lips. In the center of the room, carved directly into the bedrock, was a well. Not a typical drinking well, but a wide, deep chasm, its stone rim slick with dark, brackish water that seemed to swirl with an unnatural murkiness. The gurgling sound originated from its depths. The walls of the chamber were covered in strange carvings, not the elegant script of a ship captain, but crude, primal etchings. Figures barely discernible seemed to be dragged into the churning, depths of what looked unmistakably like a monstrous gaping maw. And scattered amongst these horrifying images were dozens of smaller, rougher carvings, etched by different hands over time. Tally marks, desperate prayers, names scored into the stone, and one symbol repeated again and again. A crude, stylized anchor. "What is this place?" Tom whispered, his voice thick with dread. The practical architect in him was silenced by the chilling reality before them. As they approached the well, the temperature plummeted further. The water within wasn't just murky. It pulsed with a faint phosphorescent glow, like trapped bioluminescence. And then Sarah saw them, floating just beneath the surface, barely visible in the eerie light, were small, pale objects, too regular to be rocks, too distinct to be debris. As Tom edged closer, his flashlight beam steadying, a horrifying realization dawned on Sarah. They were dolls, old, porcelain dolls, their painted faces distorted by the water, their glass eyes staring blankly upwards. Some had tattered remnants of clothes, others were bare, their ceramic limbs eerily intact despite the water. This was the sacrifice, not a single event, but a horrifying, continuous offering. The children, they are drawn to the truth. They see what we cannot. Elias Blackwood's journal entries flashed through Sarah's mind with sickening clarity. The wet man Maya saw, the wet tracks, the constant brine smell. It was all connected to this well, this vile repository of forgotten horrors. Suddenly, a new sound emerged from the well, rising above the gurgling. A chorus of faint, ethereal whispers, impossibly clear. They weren't speaking words, not really. They were more like fragmented echoes of sounds, a child's giggle, the creak of a ship's timber, a distant scream, the roar of a storm, and always the rhythmic slosh of waves. The collective memory of the house held within this unholy well as the echoes swirled around them. The glow from the water intensified, casting grotesque shadows on the carved walls. Tom, mesmerized, leaned closer to the well's edge, his face illuminated by the sickly light. It's pulling me," he murmured, his eyes wide and vacant. "Tom, no." Sarah grabbed his arm, pulling him back with all her might. The force almost threw her off balance. She could feel a cold, desperate current emanating from the well, a chilling invitation to surrender. Just then, from the top of the dark steps leading into the chamber, they heard it, a small, soft thump. They both whipped their heads around. Standing at the entrance, bathed in the faint light filtering from the main basement, was Maya. She held her teddy bear tightly, her large eyes fixed not on them, but on the glowing, gurgling well. And then, to Sarah's horror, a slow, knowing smile spread across her daughter's face, utterly devoid of childish innocence. the kind of smile that belonged to something ancient, something that had waited patiently in the dark depths of Blackwood Manor. I've continued the story in part 4, revealing the hidden chamber and the unsettling well, confirming the nature of the sacrifice and the collective memories held within the house. The part ends with a chilling cliffhanger involving Maya. The smile on Maya's face was a mask of serene, ancient malevolence. It wasn't Maya, it was something else looking through her. Sarah's grip tightened on Tom's arm. "Maya, sweetie," she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. The little girl didn't respond, her gaze unwavering from the well. The dolls within seemed to glow brighter, their dead eyes reflecting the unholy light. The air in the chamber pulsed, and the whispers from the well intensified, coalescing into fragmented phrases. "Come, home, the tide calls, the debt is paid," and then, clear as a bell, a single word: Blackwood. It wasn't just Blackwood Manor that remembered. The well, this ancient, monstrous thing, recognized a lineage. Sarah's mind raced, scrambling for an explanation, for a way to break the horrifying connection between her daughter and this place. She looked down at Elias Blackwood's journal, which she still clutched. Its brittle pages seemed to hum with cold energy. Her gaze fell on a final, tucked-away page, previously overlooked at the very back. It wasn't Elias's handwriting. It was a faded, elegant script signed simply, Monsieur Blackwood, 1782. This entry was a prophecy, a desperate warning. The moor beneath the manor hungers not for blood, but for memory. For the echo of lives lost to the sea's cruel embrace. Only a direct descendant, a Blackwood by blood or by binding, can appease its hunger, can offer the memories it craves. And when the line falters, or the memory fades, it will call for a new vessel, one drawn by the currents of time and the scent of its own lineage. Sarah's eyes snapped to Tom, then back to Maya. Her lineage. Sarah's mother's maiden name. Blackwood. A distant branch, yes, but still a direct connection. They hadn't just bought Blackwood Manor, they had been summoned. Her historical curiosity, her desire for a story waiting to be uncovered, wasn't accidental. It was a lure. The well's glow pulsed violently. Maya took a slow, deliberate step down the stairs towards them, her smile still fixed, her eyes mirroring the glowing water. The memories, they sing. A voice too deep for a child rasped from her lips. They are hungry. A desperate resolve flooded Sarah. This wasn't about fighting a ghost. It was about severing a connection, breaking a cycle of sacrifice fueled by the house's insatiable hunger for the past. She looked at the well, at the tiny porcelain dolls bobbing in its depths, at the grotesque carvings depicting figures being pulled into its maw. This maw wasn't a creature, it was the house itself, a living, breathing receptacle of collected suffering. "No!" Sarah screamed, a primal sound of defiance. She snatched the compass from her pocket, the one they'd found in the study, and with a desperate surge of adrenaline, flung it directly into the churning water of the well. The compass was an instrument of direction, of finding one's way, a symbol of freedom from being lost at sea or lost to the house's grip. As the brass compass hit the glowing surface, the water in the well erupted. A violent geyser of brackish water shot upwards, slamming against the chamber ceiling. The air filled with the deafening roar of 1,000 crashing waves, a cacophony of screams and gurgles. The phosphorescent glow vanished, plunging the chamber into near total darkness, illuminated only by Tom's shaking flashlight. When the chaos subsided, the well was still. The water, though still murky, no longer glowed or gurgled. The whispers had ceased. The dolls were gone, seemingly swallowed by the agitated depths. The oppressive cold in the chamber receded, replaced by the damp, stale air of a normal basement. They rushed to Maya. Her eyes were wide, blinking, confusion slowly replacing the ancient smile. She looked at her parents, then down at her teddy. Bare, her grip slackening. "Mommy, what happened? I had a bad dream." Her voice was small, childish again. They scrambled out of the sub-basement, Tom relocking the heavy iron door with a shuddering clang. They left Blackwood Manor that very day, without packing, without looking back. They sold it for a pittance, the new owners oblivious to the secrets buried beneath. Years passed. The Millers rebuilt their lives in a new town, far from the ocean, and anything that smelled of brine. Leo grew into a strong, curious teenager, still fascinated by history, but with a healthy aversion to old houses. Tom buried himself in his architecture projects, designing modern, airy homes that banished shadows. And Maya, she was a happy, bright child, full of laughter. But sometimes, on particularly stormy nights, when the wind howled outside, Sarah would catch her daughter staring out a window, her gaze distant, a faint, almost imperceptible scent of salt water clinging to her. And in those moments, a ghost of that ancient, knowing smile would briefly touch Maya's lips before fading, leaving Sarah with the chilling certainty Blackwood Manor might have been silenced, its insatiable hunger momentarily appeased. But the house hadn't forgotten its ancient bargain, and the tide had claimed a small, innocent part of Maya, a whisper of the sea's memory, ensuring that a fragment of its haunted history would always, irrevocably, live on. The well had been satisfied, but the Blackwood connection, now residing within Maya, meant the house's story wasn't truly over. It was simply waiting for the next tide.